Here we go. About a week or so ago, Talarian Community College released the first episode of their brand new show, Shuffle Up and Play, which is this whole Magic the Gathering gameplay series that he's been working on for a really long time. Even if you don't play Magic, it's super funny. And I put together a lot of the intro. He asked me to do some renders for it, and I spent like a month on them. So I was gonna take this episode to just show off the shots that I worked on, kind of in the same vein as like the pool cue ball shot from last time. I made a lot of these almost entirely from scratch. I took a lot of reference photos when I went to visit him at his studio a couple months ago. We'll just take it one by one. These playmats are actual ones that he uses on the show that I was able to rebuild based, again, off of a bunch of photos that I took as reference. I think the real ones are just like leather that's been like laser etched and painted by somebody that he commissioned them from. The difficult part for a lot of these shots was that I'm working with a bunch of like flat rectangles, right? Because it's like cards and then a playmat those cards are sitting on, and then a table. In theory, it's just a bunch of images, just flat images layered on top of each other, but they are actually three-dimensional, right? Like it's a roll of leather. It's not just a flat image plane. You can see here in Blender, this is not just like a flat rectangle. I had to go and like manually add a bunch of like bumps and curves so that it reflects the light in a more realistic way, because leather does not lay flat unless you have it stretched out. This is the texture node tree for the leather texture. Whether or not you're familiar with Blender, it probably looks like a lot. And that is because I not only had to like turn it blue and add the dragon logo, but there's several layers of texturing going on. There's the actual leather like creases and skin bumps, because it's skin. So that was interesting. I had not ever really had to think about how much leather is skin until I had to start texturing a piece of leather and realize that it's not like texturing fabric, it's like texturing flesh. In the reference photos, you can actually see the marks from where like the leather dye was applied by hand. It's like, you know, it's been like smeared on with probably like a cloth or something. The color was applied through like this paint smeared image, and then used that to sort of inform like which parts were which colors. You can see the texture a lot clearer in this alternate take of the Playmat Reveal. This is one of mine. This is the all of the cards kind of like magically floating into place was the idea. It looks a little bit more just like a physics simulation, like a slow-mo shot of the cards being dropped into the stack, but it looks so damn good. Like, I can't stress enough how difficult it is to make layers of rectangles look good. Magic the Gathering cards are also just rectangles, and then if you want to put them in a card sleeve, it's a rectangle wrapped in other rectangles. I think the most important thing to keep in mind when modeling something really of any size is that nothing in real life is perfectly symmetrical or flat. So like this card sleeve here, you can see where it's catching light in different areas, and that's because the sleeve is wrinkled, like almost imperceptibly, to the point where if you were just making a really basic representation of one, a rectangle would do it. But in real life, it's still not perfectly smooth, and so you want to add a little bit of noise to like the height of the plastic layer. Also, things touch it, dust, hands. So you can kind of see over here, I've even like added like fingerprints. The card back even kind of has to have its own tiny bumps and stuff that like they seem imperceptible to the actual camera shot, but it just changes the way that light reflects off of it subtly enough that it ends up making a pretty big difference. After the modeling, it's really just about putting it all in motion. And sometimes the motion really is the breaking point to where you can tell like, okay, that's CGI, because nothing moves like that. Thankfully, this is a very stylized intro, so the motion is very like floaty and magical. The thing that took me the most time with this project were particle simulations, because this was also the first time I ever did them. So I was learning that entire section of Blender while working on this project. I still don't totally have them figured out, but the ones that succeeded I think look pretty good. These close-up shots where the cards drop onto the table and then release like mana particles probably took me 3 solid days. But the end result ended up being pretty sweet. I tried a lot of different versions of them. The original shots even had my hand in shot. That was an interesting process because I had to match a green screen footage of my hand with a completely digital environment. and they had to be touching each other. We ended up changing it because we just thought the shot felt more awkward with like the big meaty hand kind of in the way and blocking things. But you can also see an early iteration of the particle effect here, which does not look nearly as good. You're simulating things like dust or sparks, and those things are affected by the air and by like people moving and by how thick the atmosphere is and gravity. The thing that finally ended up working was running a smoke simulation first. So I actually had the card emitting smoke, and then I had the smoke emit glowing particles so that they actually followed the pattern of a more realistic like fluid simulation. That came the closest to looking real. I'm also making mana particles and they don't exist though, right? You get as close as you can. The end result is this cool kind of like fluid floating ring that erupts from the edges of the card, and the light is actually like casting on the card and reflecting off of the sleeve and the playmat and the table. I made a bunch of different versions of that from both angles for every color of mana so that he can swap them out depending on what happens in the episode. On the very last day, I got really stuck trying to do this last particle simulation where all of the mana particles are like swirling around the magic card that's forming in midair, and the card materializes out of all of the energy, and I could not figure that out for the life of me. I tried so many different variations to get that like energy spiral to look good, and at the end of the day, I did not figure it out. I thought back to all of my old Door Monster projects when I was desperately trying to get a video out by Monday and did not always have time to do the best possible version of an effect that I wanted. And the way I always solved those was I downloaded pre-made effects, and then I went into After Effects and I smashed them all together, and it was good enough, because that's what I ended up having to do. I found this spiraling particle effect just for free. All the other rotating particles in this shot in particular are from a previous render I made for a different project for Tolarian Community College. They were Teferi's time energy that sort of like orbited around the phone floating next to his head. The background is a still image. The card is actually rendered from Blender, but only so I could get the 3D rotation in there. And then the materializing effect is just an animated noise filter in After Effects. So it truly is just old school two-dimensional compositing. There's no 3D work happening in this shot at all. Anyway, that took like a month, and then we started making Door Monster videos again. So that's what I was doing prior to any of this. It was a really good showcase of where I'm at, I think, in my current Blender skill. I'm super happy with how it turned out, and I'm very happy to have been able to contribute to the professor's new show. Let me know what you would like to see me cover next week, and I will see you then. Thanks for watching. Bye.